Hi, I'm Zed from Pets Flying to Australia, and today I'm talking to Dr Gerry Pahl from Pets Export Vet, who are based in Hong Kong. He's a vet with over 30 plus years experience. They've been flying animals since 2008. He's also the chair of the R&D task force, established by the International Pet and Animal Transportation Association. It's a bit of a mouthful, also known as IPATA, I believe. Who have actually commissioned them to research risk involved in shipping snub-nosed breeds. Today we're going to be talking about the reluctance of some of the airlines to fly snub-nosed breeds and essentially what can be done there. Morning, Dr. Gerry.
Good morning, Zed. How are you going? Nice to speak with you.
So just going to dive straight into the questions here. So you've got an awful lot of experience in the risk factors behind the brachycephalic breeds. What sorts of protocols and procedures do you and your team implement in order to mitigate some of these risks and to protect the animals as much as possible?
Well, Zed, the important thing to understand with brachycephalic breeds is that there are certain anatomical predisposing things going on with them which does increase their risk for air travel. But we've got to understand that only a small proportion of individuals within brachycephalic breeds are actually at risk. And what the airlines are doing and what the airlines have done over the past years is that they've basically banned every individual within these breeds. And as chair of IPATA, we've been doing a lot of research into this whole area, and that's why the R&D task force was set up to try and get more understanding, because the decisions made by the airlines has never been based on any scientific knowledge or scientific background. It's always been reactionary, based on either legal teams within the airlines assessing risk, or even recently more to do with social media and social media backlash whenever there is an unfortunate event which does occur. So we've at IPATA and our task force, we've been trying to rationalise this and say, hey, let's bring some science to this whole topic and see if we can work out a better way to do it. And so as I said, we believe that rather than banning a whole breed, we should look at the individuals within the breed and work out which of those individuals should fly and which shouldn't fly based on a objective assessment. And IPATA have developed this, what we call a fit to fly assessment, which is actually a specific assessment for brachycephalic or snub-nosed breeds, whereby we can actually assess their breathing ability, but there's also a systems approach where we actually look at their overall health as well, because we've got to consider that risk factors don't only pertain to the breathing ability of a dog. Obviously, there are situations where we've got pre-existing disease, and this goes across all breeds, not just snub-nosed breeds. You know, if you've got a dog with cardiac disease or respiratory disease, or you know, brain diseases causing seizures, or even diabetes or renal disease or whatever, all of those are pre-existing disease risk factors which need to be assessed. So our fit to fly assessment has been developed over the past 5 years, and we are really pleased to announce that based on our assessment that we've developed, Qantas have actually reversed their ban on snub-nosed breeds and are now accepting our checklist to ship dogs, and we've started shipping them from our place here in Hong Kong and also from Singapore and other places, west coast of USA, based on that assessment. And we really thank Qantas for being open-minded and critically analysing this issue and making a sensible decision about it. And so that's working really well. That's been going since about middle of the year. COVID really set back everything, of course, because it was planned to be launched at the beginning of the year, and obviously we're hoping to get other airlines on board. But getting other airlines on board is a bit of a tricky and difficult thing to do. So that's how it works. I mean, So looking back at our decision making as to why we think that these things should be based on the individual dog, we've got really strong data that's been dug out regarding shipment of brachycephalic dogs and dogs in general by air. There's no data, there's no research out there at all, and our task force is doing a lot of research onto this. We worked together with Heathrow Animal Reception Centre, and we actually got data from their files from the period from 2012 to 2017, basically every animal that went in and out of Heathrow, to try and look at what the actual fatality rate was, and is the decision making of the airlines in keeping with what the actual data is showing us. During that period, over 63,000 pets travelled in and out of Heathrow. Of those, around 25%, or 16,000 approximately, were snub-nosed dogs. And of those, there are a total of 12 deaths over that 5 period. 9 of those were brachycephalic dogs. So what that means is that the actual death rate of brachycephalic dogs travelling during that 5-year period through Heathrow Animal Reception Centre was 0.05%. So that means that 99.95% brachycephalic dogs travelled safely. So there's a disconnect there between what airlines are saying and what the harsh embargoes that they're putting on, and what the reality is. And it's all, unfortunately, social media and social media backlash has had a big influence on airlines as far as being cautious and worried about it. The other thing that to say about, because I actually saw on your website the petition, and I have to say that it's great that everyone tries to push in this direction, but the interaction with airlines is really complex, and us as IPATA, being an international pet shipping association, we deal with the airlines all the time, and the airlines come to our annual conference every year. We have meetings with them throughout the year. We have a lot of contact with the airlines at a high level, and often the problem is the hierarchy within the airlines, because decision making we would hope would be made by the teams in the airline that actually are dealing with AVI, or that's live animal, the live animal teams in the airline. But unfortunately, a lot of the decisions, and I'm sure this decision that's recently occurred with Emirates, occurs at a much higher level, and it just comes down, and they'll make a decision based on what maybe their legal team says or whatever, and then so even the guys on the ground in Emirates who may be dealing with the live animal, making policies and things, the pressure is coming from higher up, and so it's really difficult. And we had discussions. We know that Emirates know all about our fit to fly assessment. We've done presentations to the airline, and we've done presentations at conferences where they've attended. So we know that they know about what we've been doing. But as I say, so it's really disappointing for us that this is happening. But this trend of airline embargoes has been sort of developing over years and years, unfortunately.
Yeah. Obviously, it sounds to me that you're dealing with an awful lot of data there, and you're dealing with over complexity within governance, within airlines, and within countries. Can you tell me a little bit around what sorts of precautions you generally want to have in place for all pets? Because you're saying there isn't enough of a differentiation between brachycephalic breeds and other breeds to say, well, it's a problem with breeding perhaps, but what do you think could be improved there?
Well, I'm not saying that exactly, Zed. I guess what I'm saying is that over all dog and cat breeds, there is obviously, you've got to assess the individual as far as their fitness to fly. I mean, that's basically what a veterinary examination pre-export is there to do, and sensible decisions in discussion with the owners, because obviously these things are very emotional. We understand. I mean, I'm a pet owner myself. I know that everyone wants to keep their families together, and a lot of people, including myself, think of our pets as family members. So it's it's devastating if there is issues where they can't fly for whatever reason. But I mean, obviously the risk assessment must be done, and it's only a very, very small proportion of animals that aren't really healthy to fly, but you know, those ones do need to be identified. Sort of focusing down on the brachycephalics, what we know is that there are different airlines have got different lists of breeds which they call a brachycephalic breed, okay? And some airlines have got very short lists. For example, airlines like KLM, for example, they've only got just a few. Others have got a really long list, for, you know, Cathay Pacific and some others have got a really long list of breeds that they include as a snub-nosed breed. We've been working hard with the airlines to try and actually rationalise that, to say, well, you know, which ones really are brachycephalics and which ones really shouldn't be included. And that's an ongoing thing as well. That's another topic altogether. But basically, I guess the breeds that need to be more closely assessed are things like the English Bulldog, the French Bulldog, the Pug, Boston Terrier, things like that. And some of the other snub-nosed breeds are probably of lower risk. We've been doing a lot of work together with Cambridge University. They've got what they call a BOAS investigation team. And BOAS is actually brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome. That's the actual disease that is the group of anatomical changes that causes the breathing issues with snub-nosed dogs. Now, brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, or BOAS, we know that in those key breeds, like the French Bulldogs and the English Bulldogs and the Pugs in particular, is more common. It can be up to 30 to 40 or 50% of those animals can be variously affected, but only a small proportion of them are severely affected. And we can actually assess them and grade them based on their breathing. And that's part of our fit to fly assessment. We actually give them a grading. And obviously those that at the extreme end of that have severe breathing, even on the ground, not even in an aircraft, not under the stress of travel, and you know, they shouldn't fly, and they're the high risk ones of actually dying due to the stresses and what with their travel. But as I said, the majority are actually okay to fly. So that's sort of where it goes as far as our assessment's concerned. And, we can only hope that, we can try and get some sensibility worked into the whole system whereby, more and more airlines will take on, an objective assessment like this so that the majority of the animals can fly and those that really shouldn't fly don't fly. So that's sort of where we're at with it. But other risk factors associated with flying, obviously obesity is another risk factor, and things can be done to try and reduce these risk factors, like weight loss programs and things. Obviously, a lot of people may end up having to make a quick decision that they've got to leave and they haven't got time to put into place sort of strategies to try and reduce risk factors. Other things that can be done is you can do surgery on the upper airway of dogs as well to try and help to reduce the severity of some of these symptoms. You can do nasal opening surgery on them. You can do what they call soft palate surgery, where you trim away excessive tissue at the back of the throat to reduce the blockage at the back of the throat. These sorts of things are procedures that can be done to reduce the grading of the BOAS for these animals to reduce the severity. But obviously you need time to be able to put into place these sorts of things, right?
Do you feel that some of the restrictions and measures put in place on humans has impacted negatively on the ability to prepare pets to fly?
Are you talking about COVID, Zed? The COVID situation?
Yeah. So it's an extra layer of complexity on what we're already discussing. But have you seen an increase in difficulty to mitigate some of the risk?
Not as far as the assessment of the animals is concerned. As far as actually logistics of actually getting an animal from A to B, it's much more difficult. In my company, Pet Export, we're finding that my team to actually do a shipment, it's taking approximately 3 times the labour and the administrative time to actually get a move done, just because of the increased complexity with, for Australia, for example, like booking quarantine and getting the flights and getting all of the moving parts together is much more difficult now. And so that's a logistics issue. Some airlines are actually only allowing a pet to travel if the owner travels on the same aircraft. For example, Cathay have got that rule. So that's causing some issues with people. And of course, people like for Australia, as I say, with COVID restrictions, owners are having to maybe leave their pets behind for a period of time, go into quarantine, get themselves into Australia, which is very difficult. And then obviously, and so at the moment, I think getting the pets into Australia is actually easier than getting the humans in right now. So it's an extra layer. And also we've got to understand that a lot of airlines have had massive upheaval as well. So, for example, United Airlines have completely shut down their PetSafe program, which is their pet shipping arm. They're just not carrying pets at all. And some airlines have got reduced flights, and all of the airlines have increased their freight charges incredibly. On average, they've been increased like 300 to 500% increase in freight charges based on what they were before. Which is obviously devastating for pet owners as well, because the costs of shipping right now with COVID have gone through the roof. And you can't blame the airlines. Obviously, they've got to try and survive as well. It's we rely on the airlines to ship animals, and it's a really difficult juggling act, I'm sure, for the airlines as well. But and COVID has just made everything more complicated and difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen some stories come up on Facebook and social media and things like that of pets being left on the tarmac. Now, particularly focused on the work that you've been doing with advising people like PQ and companies in Australia. What measures do you think that not just the owners but also the officials involved in that sort of work could put in place to improve and to reduce the health risks to some of the animals?
Yeah, well, look, that's a really important point, Zed. We've got to think of moving a pet from A to B. What we call it is with packages, it's called a logistics chain, but with animals, we call it a welfare chain. So we're looking at all of the steps required, going all the way through from origin to destination. And we've got to remember that there's so many people and companies involved with that. At origin, obviously, you've got the conversations between the pet shipper and the client. And I must say to you to please tell and to let all of your Facebook members know that if ever you're moving a pet, please look out for an IPATA member pet shipper, because IPATA members have got code of ethics and strong professional basis to the work that they do. And I would strongly recommend that anyone goes to the IPATA website in the country where they're looking to ship from and try and find an IPATA pet shipper member, right? But anyway, getting back to the welfare chain, basically you've got the obviously the communications between the pet owner and the pet shipper, which involves the veterinarian. Obviously, in my case, I'm the veterinarian and pet shipper, so I do sort of all of that. But and then all the preparation that needs to be done to satisfy the destination import requirements of the pet. And then you've got the health check, and then you've got the transport of the animal to the airport. And if they're traveling cargo, then obviously they're released over to the cargo side, and the airline takes control at that point. But then you normally got a secondary service provider at that point. It's normally not the airline that actually does the terminal procedures, and the ramp procedures. Getting them from the terminal out to the ramp is normally handled by other providers that are actually contracted to the airline. And that's, a lot of people don't realize that, right? So you may have 2 or 3 companies involved in those steps, actually, from when an animal arrives at the airport to where they actually get loaded up onto the aircraft. Like sometimes it'll be 2 or 3 companies. And so the practices within those companies and the operating procedures within those companies, it's really important that they are done correctly, because you've got to understand that when the animal is traveling through the cargo terminal, there's, you want to minimise the exposure to noise and visual stimuli. In best practice, the animal will be transferred to a live animal room, an air-conditioned, quiet live animal room, while they're waiting before they go out to the ramp. They want to be transferred out to the ramp really fast and really efficiently, and not be exposed to environmental temperatures, heat and cold, as they get out to the ramp, and minimal time at the ramp, loaded onto the aircraft as quickly as possible. And then as the aircraft cargo door closes, that's when obviously the climate controlled environment starts, and then everything sort of is okay from there. Then obviously offloading at the other end. And so all those procedures that occur are really significant procedures. And there have been some incidents that have occurred, recently in the past year or so, whereby animals breakdowns in those procedures have occurred. And with it's really important. We've been working with airlines to make sure that those procedures are done to the highest degree, because any weakness point in that whole welfare chain can lead to unfortunate outcomes. And so we're reliant on everybody doing their bit professionally to make sure everything goes well. And generally, 99.9% of cases that is the case. So that's sort of my thoughts on that.
You said actually sort of being IPATA members tends to improve some of the quality of care in that chain. Are there other restrictions or improvements that you could foresee, such as improvements in governance, potential fines for companies that don't follow procedures correctly, or even just as simple as following the recommendations that you and your risk team have been making?
Yeah, well, look, there is some governance measures in place. Not many, to be honest, though, because it's obviously we're talking about an international, global system. Certain countries, like for example in the USA, the authorities in the US will actually fine airlines where there is a death on a flight entering the USA, and I don't know whether I totally agree with that, though, because it's some of the deaths that can occur are things that no one can control. For example, as I said, when you've got an animal that's got for example, a condition that no one knows about, like it hasn't been picked up, and maybe hidden disease is not that uncommon, and so you could have a sudden issue with an animal traveling, and it's not the airline's fault, it's no one's fault, it just can happen, right? It's just like with humans, anyone can have a heart attack on an aircraft. Are you going to blame the airline for that? I don't think you can, right? So I mean, these are the things that you need to be aware of. So I don't know. I can't see how there can be global rules and regulations put in place regarding this. I think it's up to the airline to have their own code of practice, and certainly there is an overall governing body called IATA, which is the International Airline sort of association. They are the ones that set regulations regarding carriage of pets, and we've got this thing called the LAR, which is the Live Animal Regulations, which is a thick manual, and every species of animal in the world is in that book, and all the regulations regarding shipping them is in that book, and there's very strict rules regarding that, and their rules and regulations they're in place already, and they do talk about a lot of aspects of pet shipment. So we do have that in place, and that's been very carefully thought out, and it's been constantly updated. So that is there, and that is, I guess, probably the most important regulatory body that we've got with pet shipping.
We've got a lot of frantic owners. We've got people who are absolutely beside themselves, worried about shipping their pets. I just want to think about what you'd like to say to them, and also to talk about some of the hard work that you and your team do behind the scenes, because we don't get to see it. We just sort of, drop our pets off, hope for the best, hope that they're going to get there okay. And then when we don't have an update, sort of 5 seconds after something has happened, like a plane's landed, as owners, we're sitting there going, "Oh my God, what's going on?" So can you sort of help to reassure some of the frantic owners, and also talk about what your day-to-day life is like on the other end of it?
Sure. I know I've been reading the posts recently regarding, obviously what's happened with Emirates, and that's caused a really big problem with pets coming out of the UK. And I know Dr. Andre from Pets Abroad, he's one of my colleagues. He's a fellow veterinarian specialist pet shipper. So he's at the coalface there in the UK. A much more difficult position than me at the moment, because I've still got Qantas being able to ship from Hong Kong to Australia, and I really feel for all of the pet owners in the UK at the moment. The brachycephalic ones are obviously non-brachycephalic breeds can still find a way, but brachycephalic breeds are having a real hard time right now, and I really feel for all of them, because it's just tragic that this situation has come about. I was even trying to work with Andre to try and find other ways. For example, I was hoping that we could possibly use Lufthansa to get pets from the UK to via Frankfurt to the Hong Kong, and then ship them on with Qantas, for example, things like that. But unfortunately, we can't. Lufthansa are not uploading them from the UK, so we can't do that. And I know Andre's trying to do his best to work on all various options for pet owners in the UK. But as far as the day-to-day operation, it's right now it's been a really, as I say, a really intense for pet shippers, because obviously communication with our clients is really important, and expectation management is also really important, because there's lots of things that can go wrong at the moment. Like, we're getting flights cancelled on a daily basis, and our export teams are having to rebook flights, and keep in contact with owners about updates and changes and things. And it's very stressful for everybody involved, not only the pet owners who are just getting so frustrated, but also our pet shipping teams, because we feel for them, because we're also most of us are pet owners ourselves. We do understand and have empathy for that. The communication's a really important thing, so we try and keep up and keep that communication as best we can, so that everyone's in a loop with what's going on. And that's the best way, and the only way you can really try and alleviate the stress. It's the unknown that people really get worried about. If something happens and they don't hear what's happening, and they read something on the internet or whatever, then obviously it can be really much worse. And we certainly aren't about making it worse. We're trying to make it easier. I mean, as a pet shipper, pet owners generally employ pet shippers to take away that stress and make that easier for them, so they can just worry about themselves. That's traditionally how it's always been for pet shippers. We've been there to take responsibility for that side of things, so they don't have to worry about it. Now, we know a lot of them will still worry, and that's okay. We know that is the case. That's just what it's all about being a pet owner. But we do our best to try and communicate. Like here in Hong Kong, when we ship to Australia at the moment, we've only got one shipment a week with Qantas that we can actually send pets to Australia, and it's a midnight check-in, and it's like a 5 a.m. flight on a Friday going into Australia. And so what happens is the pets don't get to Australia until 5 or 6 p.m. in the evening on Friday, and so we would have got we ship in the morning. In normal circumstances, we would ship in the morning out of Hong Kong. They'd get we'd ship late at night, and they'd go overnight, and they'd arrive at the quarantine the next morning. And so we would then get notification during the day that the pets had arrived and everything's okay. Whereas now they're arriving into Australia on a Friday afternoon, and we usually don't get any notification until Monday that the pets have arrived. So it's we make sure we let all of our clients know that, hey, we're not going to hear from them, but if there is any issues at all with your pet, they will contact us immediately. They're fantastic about that, the quarantine station in Melbourne. So basically, no news is good news. If we hear nothing, everything's okay. And they'll tell us if it's not okay. So that's how it is, and that's the only way that we can do it right now. And this is all COVID related,
Is there anything more that you'd like to add? That any clear messages that you want to get out there? I mean, yes, good communication, that's absolutely brilliant. And I think actually what I would like to advise people out in the community is, be appreciative of what stresses people on the other side, they have to work with. But is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, well, I'd just like to say, especially to the brachycephalic pet owners out there, I mean, I'd like to say that everybody in the industry, everybody in the pet shipping industry is doing their best to find a way around the increasing embargoes on shipping of pets, brachycephalic dogs in particular. And we hope that unfortunately it takes time. And as I say, just due to the complexity of working with airlines and the multi-layered complexity within airlines, it's really hard and difficult. And as I say, things sometimes are just completely out of control, even though you've done your best to communicate with them. And all I can say is that we're trying our best to try and find solutions. And but as I say, it's a frustrating and difficult thing for everybody. And all I can do is tell them that everybody's there is trying their best to try and help find solutions.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. Dr. Gerry, I know that you're working very hard with your team, and I appreciate that you've been active in the community and given up some of your valuable time to talk to us today. So thank you very much.
Now, Zed, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that come up on the Facebook page. It's my pleasure, and as I said, as a pet owner, I'm really very, very sensitive to how everybody is for the moment, and as I said, it's a difficult time for everybody. So thank you very much for your time.